Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. Here we are, side by side, in the East Coast time, fresh off the, what we should call it, Grandpa Baba Memorial Round of Golf.
Yep. So apologies for being a little late to get this out to you, but a bit of logistics while traveling. But we are here today to preview the Packers' upcoming Week 8 matchup against the Jaguars. Packers coming into this game 5-2, Jaguars coming into this game 2-5. Bit of a trap game though, Dad, coming off a big, electric win against the Texans at the last second, and then you got the Lions next week. Bit of a, hopefully don't overlook this game, but we're going to preview everything we have for this game. Offense, defense, special teams, all three phases.
We are not overlooking this game.
No, not at all. Jaguars still got a very talented roster despite being 2-5, and they've won 2 of their last 3 games, so they're picking it up a bit here. But before we get to any of the actual game stuff, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here today, subscribe, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We would appreciate it. Leave a review, leave a comment. We just love interacting with everyone in the Packers community space. So yeah, come leave a comment, come leave a review, and then if you like what you're listening to even more, follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes, Packers news, whether that's roster moves, injury updates, etc., content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy in the space. One-stop shopping for everything Titletown. But that does it for the pitches. Let's start getting into this game. But before we do that, a couple of news and notes from the Packers. The Packers have released fullback Andrew Beck from the practice squad. So that was something where they had used all of his practice squad elevation so far already this year, and so they probably weren't going to be able to use him anymore on the game day roster unless they elevated him to the 53, which they did not do. They also activated Jonathan Ford off of IR and then waived him, and he has cleared waivers. It's unclear if he's going to be signed back to the practice squad, but it kind of seems like that's where that's going. And then the final bit of news is former Jets head coach Robert Saleh is joining the Packers in a bit of a part-time role. It sounds like he's going to be helping the offense from a defensive perspective, but always good to get more minds in the building that have, he's a very high, whether or not, his head coaching experience with the Jets went well or not, he is a very well-regarded defensive coordinator, and a defensive mind giving the offense some thoughts on how other defenses might attack them is definitely going to be valuable. More, high-level football minds in the room can never be a bad thing,
Yeah, and he's actually wearing Packer gear, I think, as of at least yesterday.
Yes, exactly. So there's that. Those are the 2 pieces of news really going on with the Packers, Dad. But let's move on to talking about this game, and let's start off with the injury report as we always do. We do not yet have the full, questionable out, etc., that we would normally have on a Friday. We're still just a little bit before that, but we do have Thursday's practice report. And from that, for the Packers side, 1 player not practicing, and 1 player not practicing today as well is Corey Ballantyne. He was the only one not participating in practice. Some players were limited in practice for Green Bay. The first is Quay Walker, who is still in the concussion protocol, has a chance to play Sunday, it sounds like, but probably an outside chance, probably not likely. So possible we're seeing Eric Wilson at middle linebacker again this coming week. Some other players who have been limited, Elton Jenkins, he was a DNP Wednesday with a glute injury and was limited Thursday with that same glute injury. Josh Myers with a wrist was DNP Wednesday and then limited on Thursday. Devontae Wyatt with an ankle injury has been limited, and after missing the last 3 weeks, he says he should be ready to go for Sunday, so should be an exciting person to add back to that defensive tackle group. And then Jair with a groin is limited. He's been limited the past few weeks for this, so that sounds like just some more maintenance there. Jaden Reed with that ankle injury he's had is also limited. It does feel like, though, Dad, he's been limping around a lot on the field and has maybe had a little bit less juice than he's had in previous weeks, and that ankle injury maybe has been bothering him. And then Kenny Clark, Christian Watson, and Nixon with some, just nagging things with a toe, ankle, and hamstring, respectively. But it doesn't seem like there's any chance of them, not playing on Sunday. Just some things that they're working through right now. Dad, any thoughts on the Packers side of the injury report?
Well, I think Wyatt was quoted as he was expecting to be able to play this week. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a go. I think Reed will keep playing. How long it'll be before he's, back to 100%, we don't know. I think he has been a little bit hampered by the ankle injury that he got on the punt return.
Yeah, where he got folded up a little bit. Yeah, it definitely seems like it's bothering him still, but it's not keeping him from playing at least. But yeah, it definitely feels like every single time he takes a hard hit to the legs, it does seem like he's coming up a little bit slow right now. So hopefully over time that'll heal up. And then let's move over to the Jaguars side of the injury report. They don't have any players who are not practicing, but they do have a few players who have missed a couple of games recently. The first of which is Travis Etienne with a hamstring injury. He's been limited each day this week, but he did not play last week, so that's something to keep an eye on. Cam Robinson, their starting left tackle, was limited with a concussion, although it sounds like he has cleared concussion protocol now.
He cleared it today on Friday.
So they will have their starting left tackle, which is big for them. Oluokun with a foot injury, he's coming back from IR, and same with Wingard with a knee injury. They're both on their way back from IR, so they could be back in this game. That's a linebacker and safety respectively, so they could be getting some reinforcements on defense. Eric Armstead with a shoulder injury has been limited. Gabe Davis with a knee injury has been limited. And Otomeo with a calf injury has been limited. But I think all three of them are expected to play. So pretty clean injury report for both squads coming into this game. But Dad, let's move on to the game preview. There's really nothing much you wanted to say on the Jaguars side of the injury report, right?
The latest report on ATN is going to be a game time decision.
Okay,
after today's practice.
Okay, so he definitely might end up playing in this game, which would give him a nice 1-2 punch with him and Bigsby. Although we'll see how healthy he's feeling off that hamstring. Let's move on to the game preview, though, Dad, and just some quick facts about this game. It's going to be in Jacksonville at 1 p.m. local time, noon Green Bay time. The Packers are currently favored by 4.5 points with an over/under of 49.5 for an implied score of 27-22 Packers. I did see, though, Dad, recently that line might have shrunk to 3.5 now. So that might be moving a little bit tighter as we get closer and closer to game time. The weather is predicted to be mostly sunny with a high mid-low 80s, so it could be a little warm, but at least no rain, no inclement weather. But Dad, let's talk a little bit about the Jaguars side. What's been going on for them so far this year? We mentioned that they're 2-5. We mentioned that they've won 2 of their last 3. How's their offense looking? How's their defense looking? What's going on with them?
Yeah, so we like to use the per drive stats, and so football is a turn-based game, and so the Jags are 20th in points per drive on offense and 24th in yards per drive on offense. And the other thing I've been working on, you've been begging me to do, is figure out what the percent of the yards needed for a touchdown teams are getting per drive. And so by that metric, they're 16th on offense in whether they get how much of a full drive for a touchdown they get. So this corrects for teams that have a different starting field position. Green Bay in comparison is 9th in offense on points per drive, 11th in yards per drive, and 11th in percentage of yards needed to get a touchdown gained per drive. On defense, however, the Jags have struggled more. They're 31st in points per drive given up, 24th in yards per drive given up, and 29th in kind of percentage of yardage needed given up per drive. Compared to Green Bay, who is 11th in points per drive given up, 9th in yards per drive given up, and 16th in percentage of yards needed for a touchdown given up per drive. So that's trying to correct for, if you get...
Yeah, if you're getting the ball at the 20 every single time, or are you just a team that has a really good special teams or a team that has a really good defense and you're getting really good field position every time, your yards per drive are going to look worse. Like, let's say you get it to 50 every time and you're driving it down to the 10 every time, but you stall out in the red zone. It's like, oh, this team is only getting 40 yards per drive. Like, that looks pretty abysmal. But really, it's just like there was nowhere else for you to go. Like,
right. Or if you score a 50-yard drive for a touchdown, just in yards per drive looks worse than a 70-yard drive for a field goal.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But that's how that kind of controls for that. But it's also important to control for the teams you're playing against, which is why we also look at DVOA, which, shout out to FTN Fantasy for that.
Yes.
But how are the Jaguars, DVOA accounts for, strength of schedule, the teams you're playing against, et cetera, et cetera. So especially this early in the season, it can be a little bit noisy when we still don't know who the good teams are yet.
But I think that's starting to shake out now that we're 7 weeks into the season. So overall DVOA, so that's, I think, including offense, defense, and special teams, Jacksonville is 26th, compared to the Packers, who are 8th now in overall DVOA. On defense, Jacksonville is 32nd by DVOA, and Green Bay is 12th. They really struggle against the pass, being 32nd against the pass. Much better against the run, where they're up to 11th in DVOA against the run, while Green Bay is 10th against the pass and 15th against the run. So they've got the reverse, much better against the pass and kind of middle of the pack against the run. On offense, Jacksonville is 13th compared to Green Bay, all the way up at 5th. Jacksonville is 14th in DVOA in passing offense and 14th in rushing offense, while Green Bay is 8th in rushing offense and all the way up at 4th in passing offense by DVOA. And then, of course, we get to your favorite part of the team, special teams.
Yes, my favorite. I love special teams. My favorite thing. Makes me happy.
Right. Get you to your happy spot. And Jacksonville is 6th in special teams. Doesn't that sound nice? 6th in special teams.
6th would be nice.
Green Bay, however, is 27th.
Yeah, and they're coming off a 97-yard punt return last week for Jacksonville against New England in London. So that might boost their numbers a little bit. Certainly couldn't hurt. But yeah, so Jags, are having a really good year or not really. They're having a solid year on offense. They're really struggling on defense. But they do some things well. Like we mentioned, they're pretty good on special teams. But Dad, that does take us to, your favorite section. Hey, now, play nice. What are some things that you think that the Jaguars as a team are doing well right now, besides, having an above average offense, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, so they've done some things well and even trying to cover up some of their other mistakes so they're pretty good at avoiding QB pressures generally. Per NFL Pro, they give up the 4th lowest QB pressure percentage in the league. And that's mostly because they're working on their time, their speed of their plays. So they're 5th fastest in time to throw in the league per NFL Pro. So that kind of mitigates the problem they have where they're 8th fastest in time to pressure. So their 5th fastest is staying slightly ahead of their 8th worst to stay a little bit ahead of the clock there to give up a low QB percentage. So I think that they're using their play design and play calling to try to get around the speed to pressure. And then on the offensive side, their tight end Evan Ingram has really been good since he got to Jacksonville, really. Last year, he was 3rd in the league in tight ends in total receiving yards at 963. Now, he got hurt for some of the beginning of this year, but in his last 2 games, he's played pretty well. His counting stats overall are low because of that, but for some of the efficiency metrics, he's 5th in the league in yards per route run for a tight end so far this year. He's 2nd on the Jaguars in PFF receiving grade, so that including wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. And over the last 2 weeks, he's just behind Brian Thomas in yards per route run to be 2nd on the team in that metric.
Yeah, and he's an interesting piece in this game to me because the Packers might not have Quay Walker like we talked about, so it might be Eric Wilson there in the middle. It could be a really big task, guarding him in the middle of the field, whether that's, Eric Wilson or who's, a little bit less athletic, then that would be a bit of a mismatch, I think, versus Evan Ingram in terms of athleticism. Or, Edgerrin Cooper, who doesn't have as much experience in coverage. That could be a bit of a mismatch there as well. Or you bring a safety down to cover him where, as a size mismatch, that's a bit of a tough one. So it could be a bit of a, tough matchup for Green Bay to cover him. The thing that I wanted to highlight, though, that I think the Jaguars do well is their run defense is really good. And we mentioned, they're 11th by DVOA, but by some numbers, they're, an even better run defense. They're 3rd in the entire league in rushing success rate allowed per RBSDM, and they're 7th in yards per carry allowed per NFL Pro. So they are really good at stopping opponents' run games. And so that's something I'm going to keep an eye on is Green Bay going to stick with the run? Right now, Green Bay is actually running the ball at the 2nd highest rate in the league on first downs. Only the Bills are running the ball more on first downs in the NFL. So that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. Are Green Bay going to stick with their usual formula where they're going to hand it off to Jacobs a lot on early downs? Or are they going to be willing to pass more on early downs? So that's something I'm keeping an eye on. That's something that Jacksonville does really well. But what are some things, Dad, where you come into this game and you're like, oh, I think that that's something that Jacksonville can maybe take advantage of what Green Bay does? I talked a little bit about maybe Evan Ingram against the middle of the field. But what do you think are some things where that you're a little bit nervous about, we'll say?
So I mentioned Brian Thomas a little bit, the rookie wide receiver. He looks like the real deal. Who's going to be covering him? Will Jair follow him, or will Nixon, who seems to be the number 2 outside corner now, cover him some of the game? Thomas leads the Jaguars in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving TDs. He leads all rookie wide receivers in receiving yards and is 2nd in PFF receiving grade among rookie wide receivers, I think only behind Malik Neighbors in that particular metric. So he's somebody that's going to be one of their main weapons to watch out for when they're on offense. And now when they're on defense, they have some good pass rushers. Josh Hines-Allen is 5th in the league among edges in PFF pass rush grade, and he's 9th in the league among edges in pass rush win rate. Travon Walker, on the other side, is 8th in the league with 6 sacks per NFL Pro, and he's also 7th among edges in ESPN's run stop win rate. So he's a good run stopper on the edge on one side. And they are both in the top 36 in pressure rate, according to NFL Pro.
Yeah, and there are a couple of guys that, the Jags spent some really high draft capital on, both top 10 picks, Walker being the first overall pick in the draft. So they're guys who have a lot of, investment in them, and they're guys who have, really high ceilings. And right now they're playing quite well. One thing that I'm a little bit nervous about is their running offense being able to hold the ball and keep the ball from Green Bay. Now, to me, so far this year, when Green Bay's defense has struggled, it's been against teams who have really been able to hold the ball and keep time of possession and run the ball, whether that's, the Eagles week 1 with Saquon Barkley, whether that's Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. They were able to run the ball quite successfully until the fourth quarter when they took him out of the game. And whether it's just last week with Joe Mixon, on that last drive of the game for the Texans, just being able to run the ball and successfully run the ball over and over there for them. And right now, the Jaguars rushing offense is top 10 by almost every single metric. They're 10th in the league in EPA per carry. They're 9th in rushing success rate, 4th in yards per carry, 1st in yards after contact per attempt, which is, really a lot of Tank Bigsby, their second-year running back out of Auburn, is having a great year in terms of tackle breaking right now. A lot of teams are having a really hard time. He's forcing missed tackles at a crazy rate. So they're really able to, their running backs are able to create a lot, but also they're 5th lowest in stuff rate. So their line is not letting them get hit in the backfield very much either. So that's going quite well for them. And they're 3rd in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. So they're able to get more than they're really blocking for, which is another testament to how well their running back, specifically Tank Bigsby, has been playing. And so that's something I'm a little bit nervous about because, I could see a scenario where very few possessions in the game, Jaguars really holding the ball, maybe the Packers stall out 1 or 2 times and, there just aren't a lot of opportunities for them to score, and maybe 1 or 2 stops here and there could really swing the game if the Jaguars are able to hold the ball running the ball.
Yeah, and one of the things that happens when you have fewer possessions per game, it just opens the door for a greater effect of kind of random noise, where it only takes like one play to make makes more of an impact when there are fewer total plays in the game.
Exactly. And so that's something I'm a little bit nervous about, is their run game just kind of asserting, their will on the ground against us. But Dad, like we always say, the Packers are not, totally helpless in this one. The Jaguars have their own weaknesses. And what are some of those weaknesses that you think are, maybe attackable for the Packers?
Yeah, so I was looking on both sides of the ball here for things that they might be susceptible to. So they seem to be susceptible to slot receivers. So in covering slot receivers, they give up the 6th highest yards of separation per target in the league to the slot, and they have the 2nd worst EPA per attempt to slot targets. So this could be, and this wasn't necessarily for like just wide receivers in the slot. I think just any pass catcher in the slot. So this could be a big game for either Reed or Kraft and tight end when they're lined up in the slot to gain a lot of yardage. Then on the other side of the ball, looking at their offense, their starting tackles have each given up 15 pressures on the year. Now, Cam Robinson, the left tackle, looks like he is going to play now that he's clearing the concussion protocol. And then on the right side, but he's given up 15 pressures. And on the right side, Anton Harrison, he's also given up 15 pressures and has the lowest PFF pass blocking grade on their entire offensive line.
Yeah, so that could be a really, big time deal for Rashawn Gary, who had a really good week last week. Preston Smith, Enigbare, Lucas Van Ness. But it could also be a really good opportunity to make those tackles think and, test them out with some of those blitzes that they hit the Texans with last week. I would like to see more of that this coming week. The thing that I think the Packers could really attack, though, and is an exploitable weakness of Jacksonville, and we talked about, their passing defense is really bad. But specifically, I think their deep passing defense is somewhere the Packers could attack. Right now, per NFL Pro, the Jags are allowing the 3rd highest EPA per attempt on attempts 20-plus yards downfield, and Jordan Love is throwing deep at the 5th highest rate. So that's something where Green Bay likes to do it, and Jacksonville is bad at defending it. And so I think that that's somewhere that Packers could really, get some nice big plays. And that's why later on I'll talk about, I think it could be a really big day for Christian Watson on this one. But Dad, that kind of does bring us over to, how we hope the Packers are attacking, Jacksonville. And what are some things that you hope Green Bay does in this game in terms of their approach to the game?
Yeah, so I was looking through FTN Fantasy at various DVOA metrics for defending different receivers, and they're mostly bad at defending all kinds of receivers. Their best passer rating per DVOA in defending wide receivers is against wide receiver ones, where they are 19th in the league. However, they are 32nd in the league in defending wide receiver twos, 27th in the league in defending wide receiver threes, 31st in the league defending tight ends as pass catchers, and 28th in the league defending running backs as pass catchers. So this is a game where it looks like maybe spreading the ball around and including Kraft and Jacobs in the passing game could really pay off. Jacksonville is also 5th worst in EPA per play in covering short passes, so 0 to 10 yards. So like quick screens to running backs or tight ends or possibly wide receiver screens are things that could pay off in this game for the Packers.
Yeah, and definitely spreading the ball around, which is something Green Bay has done really well so far this year, so I hope they continue to do it. And that kind of ties a little bit into what I hope Green Bay does, which is I hope they're more willing to throw the ball on first down. Right now, Green Bay is running the ball at the second highest rate on first down in the league. Only the Bills are running the ball more on first down. They're running it over 60% of the time on first down. And so I'm interested to see if Green Bay is willing to, throw it a little bit more. We talked about how Jacksonville's run defense is really good. It's really good on early downs as well. And so I think that, going against a team that has a good run defense but can't defend the pass really well, I would like to see Green Bay, vary a bit from their tendencies and be willing to throw the ball and do some quick game stuff on first down early. Like you mentioned, some screen plays, some, quick, bubble screens, some quick slants. Like you mentioned, they're not very good at defending the quick passes or short passes, or really many passes at all. No offense. They're just not great in the pass game. And so I think that that's something where Green Bay could maybe break a bit from what they usually do. And I hope that they do and are willing to throw the ball more on early downs, even though at times this year they have struggled to do it. I think against this defense, they could do it. But Dad, that kind of does move us on to our next bit, which is don't take your eye off that guy. And that's either players that we think are going to have a big impact on the game, players who need to have a big game for Green Bay to win. Who are you looking at in this one that you want to keep an eye on?
Yeah, so the first one I have is I'm kind of staying with the same theme here. I'm going with Tucker Kraft because Jacksonville also gives up the sixth most receiving yards per game to tight ends and is tied for the most touchdown receptions given up to tight ends in the league. And so this could be a big game if you are a fan of the Packers or if you're a fan of Tucker Kraft in your fantasy football lineups. It might be a good start.
Yeah, he was actually just on Good Morning Football today, I think. So he's
and is it tight end? Is it tight end week this week?
Oh goodness, is it the tight end?
Tight end day is, I guess, coming up. I can't remember. I saw an ad for it. I can't remember if it was this week or coming up soon.
It's definitely coming up, and so I think. Fourth Sunday in October. So that's this coming Sunday. So
like I said, Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, keep your eye out for Tucker Kraft. Keep your eye out for Ben Sims, maybe. A couple. I feel like Ben Sims has played pretty well when he's gotten a chance.
Yeah, and his receiving is looking good this year as well when he gets a chance.
Yeah, and I would love to see, once Luke Musgrave comes back, healthy, hopefully. Maybe some, 3 tight end sets. I think that could be something that
13 personnel.
Yeah, some 13 personnel. For me, the player that I want to keep an eye on in this game, though, is Christian Watson. I mentioned a bit earlier. I think with the ability that, the Packers have throwing down the field and with the, Jaguars have been given a lot of deep passes up this year and have been giving up a lot of deep completions. And so I think Watson is ripe for a massive game. Didn't have a big game last week, but I think he should be able to hit some big plays down the field in this one. And then the other player I'm keeping my eye on is Devontae Wyatt, because, we mentioned that they have a very solid run game in Jacksonville. They're specifically really good at running between the tackles. That's where most of their good runs are coming. And so I think Wyatt, coming back in his first game back in 3 weeks could be, able to have a really big impact if he's able to help defend the run well. And if he's maybe not 100% coming back and struggles, I think that could be somewhere that Jacksonville could look to attack in the run game, because Wyatt is more of a, good pass rusher than he is rather a good run stuffer. And so that's something in this game where I'm like, okay, Wyatt, you have to be ready to be back and be able to do something that normally is not necessarily your strong suit and be able to have a really good day, hopefully stopping the run in this one. What do you think about, Watson, Wyatt, and just the D tackle group maybe in general in this one?
I think they're good choices to keep an eye on, especially I wasn't thinking about Wyatt with his game back and how much he's been their best pass rusher, it seemed, for the beginning of the year. One player I want to just throw in here that I didn't put in our notes that after we talked, Wilson on defense.
Yes.
See if he can, you talked about his pass coverage. That nice pass breakup deflected the ball away last week to a tight end.
That's true. But I think Evan Ingram is going to be a bit tougher of a matchup than Dalton Schultz is in terms of just raw athleticism. I think that's somewhere where it's going to be tough. But that's a really good point, because Eric Wilson, Jeff Hafley shouted him out this week in terms of him, not just as a player having a really good week last week, but also as a leader in terms of, getting them organized, getting them set. And that's another thing where there's going to be more on his plate, because you'd assume with Walker, if Walker misses, that Wilson would be the one calling the defense and him wearing the green dot and relaying the plays in. So that's going to be a lot on his plate. He's going to have to relay all the plays in, get everyone set before the snap, and probably do a lot of coverage on the tight ends and be ready for a running game that is going to attack between the tackles a lot. So he's going to have to make some plays there. And at times, Wilson has been attacked in the passing game. The Vikings really attacked him specifically on a lot of quick outs, and that was somewhere where he really struggled. He's had some really good games. He had a great game against the Colts. Was it the Colts that he had that standout game where he had the interception against Richardson? He stopped them on that little speed option and slowed them down. I don't know if you remember that.
He played both Richardson and the running back.
Yeah, it was Sermon at the time.
Chase
It was Sermon at the time. But yeah, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on, and definitely a player to keep an eye on. You could really pick any of the linebackers. I think you could go with Wilson. You could go with Cooper. You could even go with McDuffie. I think that middle of the field is definitely going to be somewhere to keep an eye on. And yeah, I think those are excellent choices. But that does kind of take us to, as we're wrapping things up here, our overtime, where we just kind of talk about some things that we haven't got a chance to touch on yet. Some things that don't fit in our nice, tidy boxes. It's like, oh, we're not nervous about it, but we do want to talk about it. We're not like, it's not an exploitable weakness, but we do want to talk about it. What do you want to mention here as we kind of hit some odds and ends?
Well, some of we talked about it a little bit before. Can Rashawn Gary stack success? I think he just had his season high in pressures last week, maybe his best game against the Texans. And he'll frequently be lining up across from the Jacksonville's worst pass blocker in Anton Harrison. So I'm hoping for another big game from him. And just want to mention again the ghosts of Florida games past. Green Bay had a bad game in their last visit to Jacksonville, but that wasn't against the Jaguars. So
that is true. That was against the Saints week 1. Yeah, a lot of people will mention that they struggle when they go to Florida. But I will say the last time they went was, do you remember? The last game that the Packers had in Florida? Because a lot of people are like, it was Miami Christmas Day 2022.
That was in Miami.
And they won that game. So the last time they went to Florida, they did win. That's all I want to point out there. One thing that I wanted to touch on, because I think Gary, that's a really good point, because we talked about, their tackles are struggling giving up pressure. And Gary had a really good week last week, but overall on the year, he's probably had a bit of a down year by his standards. So that's definitely a good one to point out. Lucas Van Ness also only has 4 pressures so far on the year. Did you know that?
I didn't know it was that low.
Yeah, it's pretty low for him. So hopefully an opportunity for a bounce back game for him and, maybe able to stack success as well. The thing that I wanted to touch on though, Dad, my favorite thing.
Your favorite
special teams.
Part of the team.
Long snapping.
We have talked before about how many people in the world there are who are.
There aren't enough long snappers in the world, apparently. But I did want to touch on this because, Matt Orzik just last week against the Texans, they did make the game-winning field goal, but the snap from Orzik was pretty inaccurate, very inaccurate, some might say, and Danny Whelan had to really bail them out. And that does come off of a game, against the Rams, I believe it was, where Orzik almost snapped the ball over Whelan's head in the end zone. And Whelan had to jump up and grab it like a wide receiver. I mean, once again, Danny Whelan, MVP. But they asked Bisaccia about this week, and so I wanted to touch on it. Bill Huber of Sports Illustrated. And the quote he gave, I don't think he let them finish the question. Quote, "I have absolutely no concern. You can save the rest of your question." End quote.
So what, next week?
What are your thoughts, Tad, on their, they asked him some more about it, and he was like, well, I see him in practice, and I see him snap 70 times a day in practice, and he looks great out there, and he's one of the better snappers in the league, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that I agree that he is one of the better snappers in the league.
I think it matters how you snap in the game much more than how you snap in practice.
Exactly. And so he, I think, is also the lowest, or actually, I don't remember off the top of my head, so I won't quote that one. But yeah, he struggled as a long snapper in 2 years now. He was not a good long snapper last year. He has not been a good long snapper so far this year. He's made a lot of mistakes, and mistakes that have been covered up by other people. And I think if other people did not cover up those mistakes, there would be a lot more heat on both Orzik and Bisaccia. And so that's something I just wanted to touch on, because I think it is something that does not get looked at much in terms of, long snapping is not something that, most people pay attention to on a game-to-game basis, but it almost cost the Packers the game last week and has, cost them at other times throughout the years. And so that's something I just wanted to focus on. And do you have any thoughts on, Orzik and the long snapping? I mean, it's not like sounds like it's not even anything they're even going to go to anyway else. So maybe it's not even worth mentioning, and they're just going to do it no matter what. But yeah, any thoughts on the long snapping and the quality of it so far this year?
I'm hoping that we will have nothing but extra points, and we won't bother to go for 2 because we'll be in such a big lead.
Fair enough.
How's that?
The other thing I did want to touch on, though, is the cornerback 3 battle, I guess you'd call it. Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes. Valentine has just not been playing, and he is no longer on the injury report with that ankle injury that kept him out a bit to start the year. And it's, neither of them have been playing very much, but the last few games, it's just been Stokes and no Valentine whatsoever. And Valentine's been out there on special teams, so there's that. But I'm a little bit surprised, because I feel like when we've seen both of them, Valentine has been the better player, and he was the better player last year. He's the better player when they've played so far this year. But for some reason, it's still Stokes every single time.
Yeah, and there were times in the year where we thought Valentine was about to take over, and then they both got basically relegated to the bench in their splitting time with behind Nixon and splitting with Bullard.
Yeah.
And that time is being split between Stokes and Bullard and not Valentine.
Yeah, and I'm a bit surprised because I feel like Valentine, coming off of a rookie year where he's a 7th-round rookie, and he kind of got thrust into being their corner one for a few different games last year when Jair was out and Stokes was out as well. And I thought he acquitted himself pretty well. And so I'm surprised to just see him, relegated to bottom of the depth chart essentially. And I think they were even playing Corey Ballantyne for a snap instead of him, which is very surprising. I think it was only like one snap when someone had to come out of the game, but still they went to Ballantyne instead of Valentine.
I wonder if that was a slot snap, because I think like Ballantyne, it plays a little bit more in the slot than Valentine.
That's true. I was just looking at total snap counts on defense. So it's possible it could have been a different, place that he was playing, but still surprising to me. But yeah, that was just one other thing I wanted to talk about. Anything you wanted to touch on with the corners? Any other overtime stuff you wanted to touch on?
Well, yeah. So it seems like they're settling into their cornerback and safety rotation, and it's not necessarily what we expected.
It's not at all what we expected, because Keyshawn's suddenly the outside corner, which, he's done a good job at it, so, fair enough. But I don't think anyone coming into the year was going to be like, oh yeah, Keyshawn outside corner, starting corner 2.
No, I don't think anybody was predicting that. Because the dogma, I might say, coming in was that Keyshawn was good enough in the slot, but you didn't want him playing outside, and now he's their number 2 outside corner.
And also the question coming into the year was like, oh, do they need an upgrade from Keyshawn in the slot? And it's like, okay, it turns out no, they wanted just to get Keyshawn on the field no matter what, and so they're going to play him at outside corner. So
they decided, they have changed Keyshawn in the slot.
Yeah, that's true. They have upgraded, and I would say upgraded. I think Bullard's played better there overall,
and just moved Keyshawn to the outside,
and he's played well on the outside, much better than I would have thought. Right? Like,
yeah, I think he's done better as a full-time outside corner than he did as a part-time outside corner.
I think he's done better on the outside so far this year than he did in the slot so far this year, which is kind of surprising. But anyway, Dad, let's move on to the bottom line. This is just, very simple. The Jaguars win if blank.
Yeah, so I have that Green Bay can't get their defense off the field because they're giving up too many chunk plays on Jacksonville runs.
Yep, I think definitely that could be a big one. Bigsby's hit a lot of explosive runs this year. ETN as well. Good choice. I have the Jaguars win if the Packers get stuck in too many 3rd and longs and lose the variance game in terms of like deep passes. If, it's a very, short game, they're not able to win those successful like early downs, and the Jaguars run defense is able to bottle them up, and they're stuck, 3rd and long, maybe just miss a couple of drops. We know the Packers have been prone to drops so far this year, and just, aren't able to, score on enough possessions in a slow scoring, low possession game, and just, can't quite get it over the line. But on the other side, Dad, the Packers win if blank.
I think all they have to do is for Jordan Love to take what the defense gives him. They have enough defense. Jacksonville has enough defensive weaknesses that just exploiting those weaknesses will give Green Bay enough opportunities to put points on the board.
Fair. I have the Packers win if they just play a clean game of football. I think if Green Bay can just not turn the ball over and at least go not take a lot of negative plays in terms of, running on first down, tackle for loss, 2nd and 12.
Or penalties to put them way behind the sticks.
Exactly. If they can play a clean game and not shoot themselves in the foot like they tried to last week and were able to overcome, and have also shot themselves in the foot in many other games so far this year, if they can just not do that, I think that this should be a very winnable game for them. But Dad, let's go to our last thing, score prediction. What do you got?
So I have Packers pretty comfortably winning 27-17.
Okay. I've got it a little bit tighter. I've got Packers 20, Jaguars 14, but I do think Green Bay should win this game, even though it is a trap game. Although it is, I think, is this the most definition of a trap game you've ever had? Like, coming off a big emotional last second win, and you play your the division rival who's leading the division right now the following week, and then you have a bye the week after that. Is there any more of a letdown trap game? And I think we're going to learn a lot.
We could be playing Carolina or Cleveland.
That's true. But I think we're going to learn a lot about the Packers in this one, and how, how buttoned up they are. Because a lot of games so far this year, when they have not played well, it's been a lot of their own mistakes. Wouldn't you say that's fair?
There's been a lot of just failure to pay attention to detail. Some, penalties, procedural penalties that should never happen. Things that nobody's forcing you to do wrong. You're not holding because you have to, so the quarterback doesn't get sacked.
Yeah,
you are just not lining up in the right spot. You're not close enough to the line of scrimmage, or a false start, or other mistakes that, if you're just being careful and diligent, paying attention to details, shouldn't happen.
Exactly, and through the first, I haven't checked this actually number in a few weeks, but I know through the first 5 weeks, they were top 3 in terms of most penalized team in the league. And so, if they are, buttoned up and play like a serious team this week, this should not be a problem. But if they are thinking about next week, if they're not focused on the task at hand, then this is the type of game that you lose if you're not a team that's, really serious about, taking every single opponent seriously. They just got to take it a week at a time, go 1-0 every single week. But Dad, this has been our breakdown of the Packers-Jacksonville game coming up in this week 8. Like we said earlier, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, whether that's, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Leave a comment. We would really appreciate it, whether that's, we would appreciate a good review more than a bad review, but we always love constructive criticism as well. But
invite several hundred of your friends to come make fun of us if you want.
Sure, why not? But
as long as they listen to the whole podcast.
Yeah, just get those listener numbers up. But yeah, and also follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes, injury reports, roster moves for Green Bay, content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, thank you again so much for listening. Check out the breakdown of this game. We'll be recording that next week, and we'll have that out to you next week. So check that out. We'll be breaking down everything from this game. We do 2 episodes every single week, a pregame and a postgame. So keep your eye out for those. Subscribe, follow us on Twitter, and until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.